exciting Shabbat today, talking about GilGal. GilGal. And for you that was with us, I think after Sukkot it was a very exciting day that we had. That we went from leaving Jerusalem, where the sanctuary of Yahweh was, going to Shiloh, where the tabernacle was in the wilderness, then going up to Mount Gerizim, the mountain of blessing with Mount Ebal, the mountain of cursing, and then ending the day in GilGal. Another place where many people forget that the tabernacle of Yahweh was and His presence was, and getting to see it. So today what I would like to do is I would like to go through this amazing find that they found a few years ago. About 10 years ago, during a survey, Adam Zantel, the archaeologist, found what they believed to be GilGal. But only in the last couple of years did they actually excavate it and come up with different things. And it was interesting because when you're looking at GilGal, they find was something that they didn't really understand at first. And that's probably why it took so many years till they started to understand it. And we can see the picture over here. This is the actual GilGal that you can see. And it's exactly like a sole of a foot or a sole of a sandal. And that's what puzzled them. What does this mean? What does the sole of a sandal mean? What does that have to do with GilGal? Because GilGal means wheel. That's what the word means. Even the word for compass comes from the same word. And we're going to see today, though, what GilGal, the sandal, has to do with conquering, with prosperity, with worship, and also the circular worship that's connected with GilGal. Because one of the things that they found is, in the heel of the foot, they found a compass circle style that was used for worship. And the priests on the Hagim, on the Sukkot, in Pesach, and Shavuot, they would actually come and they would circle in this way. So all of this was a mystery to them. But lately now, this mystery is coming unfolded. So I hope to help you unfold that today. Now, interesting enough, there's a term that's been used for thousands of years in Hebrew, and the term is oleh la regel. Oleh la regel. And when they use that term, it's always for going up to the feast. And they would say oleh la regel, to go up by foot. So in ancient times, they didn't have cars, they didn't have trucks, they didn't have taxis or buses or trains or airplanes. So they thought that, yeah, this means, oleh la regel, means going by foot up to Jerusalem. But yet, if you look at the exact interpretation of that, it doesn't really say going up by foot. It's going up to the foot. Oleh la regel, going up to the foot. But before they found GilGal, that made no sense to them. And as soon as they found it, and it took several years for Adam Zantel to say, going up to the foot. Because that's what it was, that the foot was a place of worship. So I wanted to start with that so that you can understand as I'm going through this, and the people that will see this video later, that they can see the picture if they haven't heard of this. So let's start in Joshua 3, in verse 8, because let's look at the very first place that Israel went to when they came into the Promised Land. Joshua 3 in verse 8. Says, "And you shall command the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant, saying, when you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." And if you drop down to verse 13, "And it shall be when the soles of the foot of the priests bearing the Ark of Yahweh, Master of all the earth, come to rest in the waters of the Jordan waters of the Jordan shall be cut off, the waters which come down from above, and they shall stand in one heap." So, interesting enough, when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the Ark of Yahweh, Master of all the earth, come to the waters of the Jordan, then the waters would be cut off. So again, you see that Yahweh's presence connected with the soles of the feet. Joshua 4, we go to the next chapter. I'll start reading in verse 4. "And Joshua called to the 12 men whom he had ready from the sons of Israel, one man out of each tribe." So now they crossed the Jordan, right? "And Joshua said to them, cross over before the Ark of Yahweh your Elohim to the middle of the Jordan, and each man of you lift up one stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Israel. That this shall be a sign among you, when your children ask hereafter, saying, what do these stones mean? you shall say to them, because the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of Yahweh as it crossed over into the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off, and these stones are for a memorial to the sons of Israel all the days. We drop down to verse 11. And it happened when the people had finished crossing the ark of Yahweh, and the priests crossed over before the people. And the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over in battle array before the sons of Israel as Moses had spoken to them. About 40,000 armed men of the army crossed over before Yahweh for battle to the plains of Jericho. In that day Yahweh made Joshua great in the sight of all Israel, and they feared him all the days of his life, even as they feared Moses. And Yahweh spoke to Joshua, saying, order the priests who carry the ark of the testimony, that they rise out of the Jordan. And Joshua commanded the priests, saying, rise out of the Jordan. And it happened when the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of Yahweh had come up out of the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the feet of the priests had been lifted to the dry land, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and flowed over its banks as before. So it's the soles of the foot of the priests that caused the water to stop, and the ark of the covenant, the presence of Yahweh. As soon as the soles of the feet crossed, the water began again. And the people came out of the Jordan on the 10th of the first month and camped in GilGal, in the east border of Jericho. So you could see that at this time, this concept of the foot, of why they would make GilGal that way, it's the very first place that they came to. And the 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan were raised up in GilGal by Joshua. And he spoke to the sons of Israel, saying, when your sons ask their fathers hereafter, saying, what shall these stones mean? Then you shall make your sons know, saying, Israel came over this Jordan on dry land. Because Yahweh your Elohim dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you crossed over, as Yahweh your Elohim did to the Red Sea, which he dried up before you until we crossed over. So that all the people of the land shall know that the hand of Yahweh is strong, so that you may fear Yahweh your Elohim all the days. So here we see, and we will also see later, a video clip, when they crossed the Jordan over on Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia. What was found over there coincides exactly with the foot over here in GilGal. 1 Samuel 11. 1 Samuel 11. We also see in verse 14. 1 Samuel 11:14. And Eli... 1 Samuel 11, verse 14. And Samuel said to the people, come and let us go to Gilgal and renew the kingdom there. And all the people went to Gilgal and made Saul to reign there in Gilgal before the face of Yahweh. And they offered sacrifices of peace offerings there before Yahweh. And Saul and all the men of Israel greatly rejoiced there. So we see that Gilgal was the place where Saul was coronated. Interesting enough, over here at that sandal, they found the altar where they did the sacrifice, and exactly the outline of the stone wall around there is exactly the size of the tabernacle. So they clearly know without a doubt that that's where the tabernacle of Yahweh would have stood. So, as Adam Zantel started to unravel this, and our good friend Yoshi Stepansky that works with us here at the Bible School, is a good friend of mine, and took us out to GilGal. I would like to show now part of that video with Yossi that he can explain to you a little more in depth about the finding of the shoe in GilGal.
As I mentioned already at Grizim, for the last 30 years, in fact even a little more than 30 years, a little before, in the late 1970s, began the archaeological survey of Samaria. And for the last more than 30 years, they've been surveying and finding hundreds of archaeological sites that weren't known about before. Everyone knew where Shechem is, right? But when you traipse around in a barren area like this, right, you go from hilltop to hilltop, you find all kinds of things. Sometimes you even find no clues to buildings, but you find the pottery sherds, like the one Reut found this morning. Okay, and when you find pottery sherds, then you look for stumps of walls. Sometimes only some rocks that protrude, or even not protrude. Some rocks laying around, or a pile of rocks, or carvings in the rock. Okay, and then you understand that you found an archaeological site. Everybody hears me?
Yes.
You hear me, even without you hear me also, right?
Yes.
It's a natural theater. As a matter of fact, the archaeologists that have dug here, Adam Zertal and Dr. Dror Ben Yosef, I know them both, they call this a proto-theater. A natural proto-theater, and that's one of the reasons why this site was chosen by the children of Israel as one of the first GilGals. The GilGal that we talked about. Somewhere snoozing, I'll remind you what we're talking about. When we sit up here on these rocks, it seems that 3,000 years ago, a little more, about 3,200 years ago, 3,300 years ago, when the children of Israel entered Canaan, this is one of the first places they stopped and camped out, but they decided that this camp, this point, will be a ritual focal point for them, a place where they're going to put the tabernacle. And the GilGal is mentioned a number of times where the tabernacle was, until it was brought to Shiloh, where we were in the morning. So we're now the step before Shiloh. Okay? And only recently have they found a few of these sites. And when you go above and you look at it at an aerial view, and you know what? Even 2 days ago, I looked into it in Google Earth. You know? I have it printed out here. You have to know about it before. And since I knew about it before, I was able to make out the outline of the compound, which is about 180 meters long and about 60 or 70 meters wide. The outline, I'll show, the outline of the compound looks like the sole of a foot or a sandal. Now, when you go up and you look down, you see as if you're looking at a sandal. Here's the plan of it. You see it? Okay, it's 180 meters long, about 79, 80 meters wide, and it looks like a sandal. For a few years, it was discovered, the site was discovered about 10 years ago, a little more maybe, but they didn't understand it until just a few years ago after excavating it. And we'll talk about the excavations, okay? But first of all, it looked weird. Like a stamped foot on the face of the ground if you're looking from above. And no one went above except God looking down, right? And they still were able to outline it as a sole of a foot. And so Adam Zertal thought about that for a few years. And in the end, he came to the conclusion that it was on purpose. This outline of a foot was on purpose, because the Bible itself mentions a number of times that the children of Israel came in, and wherever they stamped by foot, they conquered the land. Also, in Egypt, the pharaohs in Egypt, every time they wanted to tell the public that their governors of the land and the world, and how they stamped out their enemies, they showed it by putting a stamped foot, even in Tutankhamun's grave, 15th century BC, right? There's a sandal and there's a golden sandal and a golden foot, and inside the sandal, on the inside part, there are pictures of 9 bows, which are the 9 enemies of Egypt. A symbol of how he stamped them out. Stamping out an enemy, that's already in Egypt. The pharaohs used that. The children of Israel came out of Egypt. And it seems that they decided to still use this symbol. But here in Canaan, it meant this stamped compound is a symbol of God who's helping us conquer the land of Canaan. And they noticed that the wall is really a way to walk. And the theory is that this walkway is a ceremonial walkway. The children of Israel came here. Many of them sat here and watched as the priests went around along this walkway. When they went around, that's the meaning of the word in Hebrew, Chag. Right? When Dan says, Chag Sameach, you said Chag Sameach?
Chag Sameach.
Yofé. When Dan says Chag Sameach, that's what all Jews say one to another in the time of the holiday. Happy holiday. H-H. Chag Sameach. Chag in Hebrew is holiday. But Chag literally means going around. And no one understood until today, recently, why the word Chag is used for holiday. Holiday in English doesn't mean walking around. No. But in Hebrew, lachug means going around. Compass is mechoga, chag, mechoga. So the root of the word chag is going around. And now for the first time we understand it. Because here we find a ceremonial way that goes around the compound. So it seems that the first Israelites started coming here and going around the compound as part of a ceremony that in later years turns into the holidays of Sukkot, Passover, and Pentecost. So that's the word Chag, which was understood here. But maybe even the more interesting part is when Jews go on pilgrimage, the word pilgrimage, okay? In Hebrew, we say, Ole la regel, 2 words. If you translate the words Ole la regel, it means going up to the foot.
Wow.
We use this term already for thousands of years. We say to each other, let's go on pilgrimage. We mean let's go up to the foot. Okay? My wife is a Hebrew teacher. She would ask, why go up to the foot? We should go up by foot.
Yes.
And everyone thinks, all Jews think, if you ask an Israeli today, you'll ask him, why does it mean going up to the foot? He'll tell you, no, it means going up by foot to Jerusalem. Don't take the train. Go walk up to Jerusalem. Okay? And, by the way, there's a theory today that some of the Roman roads in Israel were originally made for the pilgrims to go up by foot to Jerusalem. That's fine. Going up by foot means you go up by yourself, you climb up to Jerusalem, and you go to the temple, like Yeshua did. He went up to Jerusalem by foot. But the concept is going up to the foot. La'alot la. La means to the foot. Where's that come from? Solution is, again, from here. They come to here, to the foot, which is the place where the children of Israel first came together to celebrate their celebrations in one of the GilGalim. And here it means coming up to the foot. Okay? So that's another beautiful insight. When I heard that from Adam, I was here with him. I think when I was here with him, he didn't come into these insights yet. I think it was still a riddle. And then one day they woke up to this great idea of this is a foot, and this is the beginning of the celebrations of the people of Israel, how they began to celebrate in Canaan.
Alright, so I think we understand the concept, right? And I wanted you to understand the concept first, because now I want to share from the scripture what that concept means. And to show you the scriptures and have it come alive. But before that you can't. You can't understand it unless you understand GilGal, unless you understand that this is a place of worship. And within that place of worship, in the sole of the sandal, or the sole of the foot, is that circular pattern that's for worship, for the feast, for the yearly cycle that also comes into it that I'm going to get into later. Let me start in Joshua 1. Let's go back to the book of Joshua now. Because first concept I want to show is the foot for conquering the land and the permanency of the covenant. The foot for the conquering of the land and the permanency of the covenant. So as we see here, this was a functional concept to the Israelites. That the Israelites, because of the scriptures we're going to see, and because as soon as they come outside of Egypt, and they come into Mount Sinai, it's the same kind of concept, and then when they come out from Mount Sinai and come over into the Promised Land, it's the same concept. It's the concept of the foot of Yahweh, the foot dealing with worship. And amazingly, here it is. 3,500 years later, they find this foot there, GilGal, in the shape of a foot that they never knew before. So Joshua 1 in verse 2 says, "My servant Moses is dead, and now rise up, cross over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, to the sons of Israel. Every place on which the sole of your foot shall tread, I have given it to you, as I spoke to Moses. From the wilderness in this Lebanon, even to the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, all the great sea toward the setting of the sun, shall be your border. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not fail, nor will I forsake you." So here it is. The foot for conquering the land and the permanency of the covenant. Every place which the sole of your foot will tread, I will give to you. And like I said, this concept that ancient Israel had, that you see kind of fall by the wayside during the Herodian times, and definitely today, as the Greek Hellenistic way came in, they lost this functional concept. But if you remember, when the Ark of the Covenant was taken, and the Philistines had it, and remember their deity fell down and broke its arms and broke its head, and then what happened? They were getting scared, they had this plague of hemorrhoids, and they're like, we got to get this thing back. But what do? They say, hey, we can't send the Ark back without sweetening the face of this Elohim. So what do? They make golden hemorrhoids. When we read it and we laugh, and it is kind of funny, but at the same rate, they're thinking functional. They're thinking functional because this Elohim gave them hemorrhoids, so they want to make these golden hemorrhoids to sweeten his face. So it's the same way that Israel is thinking here. They're thinking in this functional way that Yahweh is saying, every place your foot shall tread, and now they're putting something with the sole of the foot, again, with the conquering of the land and the permanency of the covenant. Deuteronomy 2 and verse 5 says, "You shall not fight against them, for I will not give their land to you, even to a step of a sole of a foot, for I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession." So this is when they're going the way, they haven't come to the promised land yet, and they have to go around Mount Seir. And what do they say? He says, don't fight against them. I will not give even to a sole of a foot. Not even to a sole of a foot. So we still see the same concept. Deuteronomy 11 verse 22. Deuteronomy 11 and verse 22. Says, if keeping you will keep this command which I am commanding you today, to love Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in all his ways, to cleave to him, then Yahweh will dispossess all these nations from before you, and you shall possess nations greater and mightier. Every place where the sole of your foot treads shall be yours, from the wilderness in Lebanon, from the river Euphrates, even to the furthest sea shall be your border. So again, we see it's the same way the priests, as soon as they came over, they're the first ones to go in the Jordan River. As soon as they put their sole of the foot in the river, the water stops. As soon as they come outside the river, the water starts again. So we see this concept with them, that they're seeing the power of Yahweh. They're seeing the power of His Spirit in the sole of the foot. That's representing Yahweh conquering the land and the permanency of the covenant. 2 Chronicles 33. 2 Chronicles 33 and verse 7. 2 Chronicles 33 and verse 7 says, "And he placed the engraved image of the idol that he made in the house of the Elohim, of which Elohim said to David and to his son Solomon, in this house and in Jerusalem that I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. And I will not again remove the foot of Israel from off the ground that I appointed to your fathers, only if they take heed to do all the commandments that I have commanded them all toward all the Torah and the statutes and the ordinances and the hand of Moses." So again, you'll see this over and over, this phrase. And also, as we're also seeing, and we'll get into it in another section, not right over here, but we'll see that it's also conditional on obedience. So we see that the sole of the foot is for conquering of the land and the permanency of the covenant, but it's also conditional on obedience. So he's saying, if you're obedient to my Torah, then I will honor every place the sole of your foot goes. Job 39, the book of Job, probably the oldest book in the Bible. And we even see this way back when, before the children of Israel came into the promised land, this concept. Job 39, in verse 13. Job 39 and verse 13 says, "The wing of the ostriches flap joyfully, though not like the stork's pinions for flight. For she leaves her eggs to the earth and lets them worm on the dust, and forgets that a foot may crush it, or the beast of the field may trample it." So we see again the foot for conquering. The foot for conquering. "The wings of the ostrich flap joyfully, though not like the stork's pinions for flight. For she leaves her eggs to the earth and lets them worm on the dust, and forgets that a foot may crush it, or the beast of the field may trample it." A foot may crush it. So we see this concept. The foot is for conquering. It's for crushing, even going back to Job. Isaiah 26. Isaiah 26 in verse 4. Isaiah 26 and verse 4. "Trusting Yahweh forever, for in Yahweh is an everlasting rock. For he bows the dwellers on high, he lays low the lofty city. He lays it low to the ground, he makes it touch even to the dirt, to the dust. The foot shall trample it, the feet of the poor, steps of the weak. The path for the just is upright, upright one, level the tract of the just." So the foot will trample it, level the track for the just. So we see this functional concept again of the foot going for conquering. Deuteronomy 29 and verse 5. Deuteronomy 29 and verse 5. Yahweh says, "And I have led you 40 years in the wilderness. Your garments have not worn out from off you, and your sandal has not worn away from your foot." So again, this is showing, again, conquering of the land and permanency of the covenant. So there's more to it than Yahweh just doing a miracle, that they wouldn't need clothing. He could have done it in another way. Sandals, he could have brought them cows to make new sandals out of. No. But he made sure that the sandal would not wear out. Why? Because he's showing them a concept. That not only would they be conquering the land, but the permanency of the covenant. That when they were in the wilderness, when the manna was coming, when they were completely under, the faith of Yahweh and Yahweh's jurisdiction, nothing ever wore out. There was a permanency to the covenant because of that. Second point I want to make on the foot. The foot or the sandal showing peace and prosperity in the land. We'll see this over and over again, that the foot or the sandal showing peace and prosperity in the land. Psalm 121. Psalm 121. And again, I'll keep referencing, without the find of GilGal, you'd never think of this. Our mind, we would never put these things together in the way you can when you physically see, and that's why I say you have to come to the promised land. There's no way coming here will make the Bible a black and white book become color. It makes a flat book become a pop-up book. It makes the Bible come to life like you'll never have it before. Psalm 121, a song of ascents. I will lift up my eyes to the hills. From where shall my help come from? My help comes from Yahweh, the maker of the heavens and the earth. He will not give your foot to slip. He who keeps you will not slumber. He will not give your foot to slip. So again, the foot, the sandal, showing peace and prosperity. Your foot slipping is showing what? It's showing instability. It's showing, that you're not strong there. So again, we see the foot showing with peace and prosperity. Isaiah 5, back to Isaiah, the 5th chapter. Isaiah 5 in verse 26. And he will lift up a banner to distant nations, and he will hiss to them from the ends of the earth. And behold, it shall come with swift speed. None shall be weary nor stumble among them. None will slumber or sleep, nor shall the waist cloth of their loins be opened, nor the thong of their sandals be broken. Nor the thong of their sandals be broken. So again, we see the whole concept of a strong sandal, the foot being straight, not slipping. The sandal, the thong of the sandal is not broken. Again, showing peace and prosperity in the land. Deuteronomy 33 and verse 24. Do you remember the prophecy to Asher? Asher will dip his foot in oil, remember? So it's showing. The foot is something that is showing security. The foot takes you from place to place. The first thing that moves when you move is your foot. And that's why the foot, every place your foot treads. Your foot is your leader. Your foot takes you from place to place. And isn't it interesting in the new covenant that Yeshua adds in to the Pesach the idea of the foot washing? Because your foot is the thing that's leading you. And cleaning of the foot, the renewing of the covenant, all connected together with the same thing. Let's go to Proverbs now. Proverbs 3. Proverbs 3 in verse 1. My son, do not forget my Torah, but let your heart guard and keep my commandments. For they shall add length of days and long life and peace to you. Mercy and truth will not forsake you. Tie them on your neck, write them on the tablets of your heart. So we see here how important the Torah is to that security and prosperity in the land and in the covenant. Drop down to verse 21. My son, do not let them depart from your eyes. Keep sound wisdom in judgment. Verse 23, then you shall walk in your way safely, and your foot shall not stumble. So again, we see that the obedience to the Torah being connected with keeping that sure foot. Verse 26, for Yahweh shall be at your side, and he will keep your foot from being caught. Yahweh will be at your side, and will keep your foot from being caught. Then you will walk in your way, verse 23, and your foot shall not stumble. So again, we see that the foot is connected with obedience. The sandal showing prosperity in the land for obedience. Luke 15. Luke the 15th chapter. In verse 20. And rising up, he came to his father. And this is the parable of the prodigal son. But he, yet being far away, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. And running, he fell on his neck and he kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and no longer am I worthy to be called your son. But the father said to the slaves, bring out the best robe and clothe him, and give him a ring for his hand and sandals for his feet. So we see the sandals again showing with prosperity, showing with him being accepting him. And bring the fatted calf, slaughter, and let us eat and be merry. If we go to Romans 10, Romans the 10th chapter. So again, you see the prosperity. When he's coming home, out of all the things the father is saying for the child, we know the ring, the signet ring shows the kingship, the robe shows the kingship, but he wants to give sandals for the feet because it's showing prosperity in the land. Romans 10 and verse 13. For everyone who may call on the name of Yahweh will be saved. Coming from Joel 2, right? How then may they call on one whom they have not believed? And how may they believe one whom they have may not heard? And how may they hear without a preacher? And how may they preach if they are not sent? Even it has been written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news of peace, of those preaching good things. How beautiful the feet. And as we know, the foot is not the most beautiful part of the body. You know, that's why the foot washing takes so much more significance to it. But here, how beautiful are the feet. Why are the feet beautiful? Because the feet are going beforehand. The feet are bringing this message of what? A message of peace. So we see the foot, the sandal, showing peace and prosperity. And like I was saying, by the Herodian time, by the New Covenant, by the time of the New Testament being written, they didn't have the functional mindset anymore of the literal GilGal. They knew about it, but you don't see it. You don't see GilGals like that. You don't see physical sandals being built or cities in that way. In the Israelite time they did. It was a functional mindset of connecting the physical building of it with the prosperity, with the conquering. But in the Herodian time, in Yeshua's days, they knew of the concept, and that's why they write this. How beautiful the feet, bringing the good news. You know, the sandals that come with it. But the concept was still there, but maybe not in the exact physical way. Deuteronomy 28, in verse 35. Deuteronomy 28, 35, because we see the blessings and the cursings. And it says, Yahweh will strike you with an evil boil on the knees and on the legs, of which you cannot be healed, from the sole of your foot even to your crown. So this is if you're disobedient again to the Torah, from the sole of your foot to the crown of your head. And then if you drop down to verse 65 of the same chapter, Deuteronomy 28 and verse 65. And among these nations you shall find no ease, nor shall the sole of your foot have rest. But Yahweh will give you there a trembling heart and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind. So again, when they're disobedient, they're going to be cast out of the land. And what happens? They will not have rest from the sole of their foot. They will have no rest. So again, it was the sole of the foot that was giving them rest when they came into the land. That's the very first thing that goes into the land, is the sole of the foot. And he's saying when you're cast out of the land, you will not have rest from the sole of the foot, starting from that. Alrighty. Point number 3. Point number 3. The foot, the sandal, connected to worship. The foot, the sandal, connected to worship, like we said, ole la regel. Ole la regel. The going up to the foot. Going up to the foot. And I believe this goes all the way back to Exodus 3. Because remember, when the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they lost the Torah. They lost sight of Shabbat. They lost the name of Yahweh. We know it was there before there. We know that before, even going back to Genesis 4, men started calling on the name of Yahweh. But we know, when they get to the Exodus, which one of the first things Moses says? When I say to the children of Israel, Elohim has sent me, they'll ask, what is his name? And that's when Yahweh reaffirms his name. This is my name for all generations. But they had lost it before that. So now when we go to Exodus 3, when we see that Moses is not just going to reinstitute the physical name of Yahweh, but he's going to reinstitute the worship pattern. The worship pattern. So again, these people being very functional, they're going to look at everything Moses says, and everything he does, and everything that Yahweh does with Moses, and they're going to see it as a pattern of worship. And that's why it was important that Yahweh said to Moses, when you're making the tabernacle, do it exactly like I tell you. Because these are functional people. These are people that are going to do exactly like they're told. Because that's the way the mindset was back then. Another reason why it's impossible for me to believe that Yahweh would have them go out inside a crescent moon. When the crescent moon was always connected with occultic things and moon worship. Because they're going to physically do exactly. So if they're sighting a crescent moon, what's going to happen? The same as the Philistines making those little hemorrhoids, the Israelites would be making crescent moons. We'll get into that a little later. When we show the circular pattern of Yahweh, I think it's very clear that the beginning of the year and the beginning of the month would be part of that circular pattern, which the crescent moon does not fit. But Exodus 3 and verse 5, look what happens when Moses is before Yahweh. And he said, do not come near here. Pull off your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. Pull off your sandals from your feet. So I definitely believe that the fact that this is put here, I mean, it's not something that's very important to the story, but why? Why is this put in context? I believe it's put in context because of this. Because as Moses is first meeting Yahweh, what is the first thing Yahweh's saying? That the sandal is going to be something that's connected with the worship ceremony. Take off your sandal, because where you are is holy ground. And I believe part of making this was probably connected because of that. We go to Joshua 5, Joshua the 5th chapter. We see the same thing when Joshua is meeting the messenger of Yahweh. Joshua 5 and verse 13. And it happened when Joshua was beside Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood in front of him, and his drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went to meet him and said, "Are you for us or for our foes?" So Joshua sees this person, he doesn't know who he is. And he said, "No, for I now come as the captain of the army of Yahweh." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped. And he said to him, "What does my master speak to his slave?" And the captain of the army of Yahweh said to Joshua, "Take off your shoe from your foot, for the place on which you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. So did we see, it's not just the mountain of Yahweh that's holy. It's not just the physical place. It was the presence of Yahweh that made that holy. And that's the reason why they would want to put the sandal. Because the same as when Moses was in the presence of Yahweh, take off your sandal, you're on holy ground. The same as when Joshua is before the messenger of Yahweh, take off your sandal, you're on holy ground. That Yahweh's going to dwell here. Yahweh's going to dwell in GilGal. They're going to have an altar there. They're going to have the tent of meeting. So they want to show symbolically Yahweh's presence within that sandal. Ecclesiastes 5 in verse 1. Ecclesiastes 5 and verse 1 says, "Guard your feet when you go to the house of the Elohim, and draw near, more than to give a sacrifice, as do the fools. For they do not know that they are doing evil." So again, when you come to the house of Elohim, you want to guard your feet. Why? Because your feet is where you're going to. Your feet is where it takes you from place to place. The foot is symbolic of your action. Because your action starts with the foot. Let's go to Matthew 3. Matthew 3 and verse 11, because we see this again in the new covenant, that the foot or the sandal is connected with worship. It's connected with worship. Matthew 3 in verse 11, and this is John the Baptist, he says, "I indeed baptize you in water to repentance, but he who is coming after me is stronger than me, of whom I am not worthy to remove the sandals. He will baptize you in the Holy Spirit and fire." So here it is, John says, the one coming after, he's greater than me, that I'm not even worthy to remove his sandals. Now why would John, out of all the analogies that he could use, why do you think that John would use that analogy? Let's go to John 1, because I think it explains himself when you understood where John is when he's doing this. John 1 and verse 27. "This one it is who has come after me," talking about Yeshua, "who has existed before me, of whom I am not worthy that I should loosen the strap of his sandals." The same as we read in Matthew, but in John he adds one other thing in verse 28. "These things took place in Beth Abara, at the crossings of the Jordan, where John was baptizing." These took place at Beth Abara, at the crossing of the Jordan, where John was baptizing. Where's Beth Abara? Very interesting place. If you go to Judges 7, we will see where Beth Abara is. Judges 7 in verse 24. Judges, the 7th chapter, in verse 24. "And Gideon had sent messengers to all the hills of Ephraim." So now they're in the land of Ephraim, saying, "Come down to meet Midian, and capture the waters before them as far as Beth Barah and the Jordan." So over here in the Aramaic, you have Beth Abara, which is the Aramaic term, Beth Abara, at the crossing of the Jordan. And here you have Beth Barah in the Hebrew, at the crossing of the Jordan, the same place. "And every man of Ephraim was called up, and they captured the waters as far as Beth Barah and the Jordan." So interesting now, Beth Barah is not all the way down in the south at the corner of Benjamin and Judah. Beth Barah is up near Ephraim, very close to GilGal. which makes it more interesting. As John is baptizing just a couple of kilometers from GilGal, the place of worship, in the sandal, and what does he say? The one who's coming after me was before me. Who was the rock in the wilderness? Who was the rock that followed him? That I'm not worthy to unleash the sandal of his shoe. So again, none of this would make any sense without finding GilGal. But we find GilGal, and then all of a sudden these other places fall into pattern. If we go to 2 Kings 2, another scripture that I found just as far as the location, because right now, they never really found the GilGal. They thought GilGal was more to the south, going more toward the Dead Sea, but they never had an actual tell that they said, this is the tell of GilGal, just the area over there. But if you look at where they thought GilGal was in the south, where would that be from Shiloh? Where they thought GilGal would have been southeast of Shiloh, or Shiloh would have been northwest of there. But let's look at where Scripture tells us GilGal is in connection to Shiloh. 2 Kings 2, and verse 1. And it happened when Yahweh was to cause Elijah to go up to the skies in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha went from GilGal. Elijah said to Elisha, please stay here, for Yahweh has sent me to Bethel. And Elisha said, as Yahweh lives and your soul lives, I will not leave you. And they went down to Bethel. They went down to Bethel. So like I was saying, and Bethel is just south of Shiloh. So if you're looking at the place where they thought Shiloh was, or where they thought rather GilGal was, it would have been northwest of that place. But here, it says that they were in GilGal, and they went down, they went south to it. So just a geographical location that definitely fits with this area, but doesn't fit with the old pattern. The last point I would like to go over is the circular pattern of worship that we see. The circular pattern of worship. So first we went over the foot for conquering the land and the permanency of the covenant. The foot or the sandal showing peace and prosperity in the land. And then the foot or the sandal connected to worship. Connected to worship. Going to the foot for worship. Now I want to talk though about the circular pattern, because within that foot, like we said, you see a circular pattern there that the priest would go around in a circle for worship. So why would they do that? Why would they be going around in a circle for worship? Let's go to Job first, Job 38. Because this circular pattern of worship goes all the way back to, I believe, almost the beginning of time. Because Yahweh, I've said this about 1,000,000 times, I'll say it 1,000,001 now. Yahweh works in the circular, He doesn't work in the linear. And this was a pattern that I believe Yahweh probably gave to Adam in the Garden of Eden. Yahweh works in the circular, which means if you can find Yahweh's pattern, it doesn't change. Then you'll find the pattern throughout the whole Bible. And that's why it's so neat. Whether you're finding out about the tribes of Israel, or you're finding out about the Shabbat, or you're finding out about whatever you're finding out about, once your mind is open to that pattern, the pattern never changes. Now all of a sudden, you can read the whole Bible over again, and it's like reading it for the first time. And that's what's exciting about these kind of studies. Because once you know the pattern, that's what the sandal means. That's what the circular pattern of worship. Then it all fits together. So Job 38 and verse 31 says, can you bind the bands of the Pleiades, or loosen the cords of Orion? Can you bring out the constellations, the Maseroth, in their season? Or can you guide the bear with its sons? Do you know the limits of the heaven? Can you establish their rulership on the earth? We went over this at Sukkot. Anybody that may be listening to this video, you can go to our website, www.coyhw.com, and you could watch the video, The Signs in the Heaven, the Return of the Bridegroom from Sukkot, and it will explain about the Maseroth. You know, the pagans took Yahweh's Maseroth, they made it into a pagan zodiac, which we don't believe in or follow, but the Maseroth is something that is scriptural. We see it right here, the word is used, and again, there are 12 constellations for the 12 tribes of Israel, and the year goes around every 30 days. the sun goes into another constellation, and then when it comes around the year and it passes the equator, it goes back into the first constellation, and a year has gone by. It's very simple, and that's what the Bible is saying here. That before time even began, Yahweh knew, the Lamb of Yah slain from the foundations of the world, that the plan of Israel would be preordained through the 12 tribes of Israel. And it's interesting if you go into it, we're not going to go into it now, but I do somewhat in the message, and you could study more for yourself, how each tribe indicates a constellation. We know Judah is for the constellation, of the lion, and so on. Dan with the balances of judgment, that their name and what they do is connected, and all of it again showing the Heavenly Father's whole plan of salvation within the stars and within the constellations. So again, we see here though the circular pattern of worship, I believe, goes all the way back to the beginning, because Yahweh has no beginning, He has no end. His whole pattern, it's a circular pattern, it repeats itself. And if you look at a perfect circle, that's what you see. You don't see a beginning and you don't see an end. It just keeps repeating the same thing. Deuteronomy 11 and verse 10. Deuteronomy 11 and verse 10. He says, "But the land which you are entering to possess is a land of hills and valleys, drinking water from the rains of the heaven, a land which Yahweh your Elohim cares for. For the eyes of Yahweh your Elohim are always on it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year." Circular pattern, beginning of the year to the end of the year. From equinox to equinox. That's the way that the year is divided. A circular pattern. Exodus 34. Exodus 34 in verse 22. It says, "And you shall observe a feast of weeks for yourself, the first fruits of the harvest of wheat, also the feast of ingathering after the turn of the year." The feast of ingathering after the turn of the year. That word is tekufa in Hebrew, and it literally means the equinox. So again, he's telling us the agricultural cycle as well as the biblical calendar. That the biblical calendar is going to run on the agricultural cycle. And that's why if you wait for the equinox, what will happen? You'll always have your barley in the spring for your wave sheaf ceremony. You'll always be able to have your Shavuot and your harvest, your grain harvest in, and you'll always have your fruits for ingathering. We went over this. Why is it called the Feast of Sukkot here? The Feast of Booths or Tents? Because the children of Israel lived in tents for 40 years. But here it's called the Feast of Ingathering. Different word, totally. Because it's the time you're ingathering all of your harvest. And we know in the end time there's going to be a great ingathering in the end. So again, it wouldn't be ingathering if there was no harvest. And if you're starting your year before the equinox, and then your Sukkot is coming in August or beginning of September before the harvest is in, you don't have any ingathering. It's that simple. So clearly the scripture says here that the Feast of Ingathering after the turn of the year, after the Tekufa. And that's the circular pattern. Again, it's showing the circular pattern. That the biblical calendar really is not so difficult. It's not so difficult. We know the moon is a circle, right? And that's why we wouldn't start the month when it's 3 days into the pattern, because it wouldn't fit a circle, the crescent. But the moon is a circular pattern. When it's dark, it's resetting. When it's a quarter light, it's a quarter of a month. When it's full, it's a half month. When it's a waning quarter, it's 3/4 of the month. And when it's dark, it's resetting. It's a circular pattern. So it can only work if you start your month by conjunction. If you start your month by crescent sighting, you won't have a circular pattern. You throw out Yahweh's whole pattern, and in missing, you're missing everything here. You're not just missing where GilGal is, but you're missing the whole point of the connection to worship. With it, and also the circular pattern of the worship. If we go to Exodus 23, Exodus 23, just a few chapters back, we see something very interesting here. Verse 14. 3 times in the year you shall make a feast to me. 3 times in the year you shall make a feast to me. That word there for feast, it's not the word Hag, which Yossi was talking about. Hag means feast, and it comes from the root word for circle, but that word is Hagag. Hagag. It comes from the same root as Hag, but it's not the word Hag. You shall make a Hagag. The word Hagag, 2287, is a little bit different, because it literally means to move in a circle, to march a sacred procession to observe a festival. Literally it means to march in a sacred procession, to move about in a circle. So I believe Hag is 2282 maybe, or 2283, but this is 2287, Hagag. It's a little bit different. So he's saying 3 times in the year you are to do that. Why? From this. So when they're wondering why they would go around in a circle, it's very simple. Because that's the pattern. Because that's the pattern. The pattern is to go around in a circle. And where did the pattern come from? Let's go to Joshua. Go back to Joshua. Joshua 6. Joshua 6. In verse 2, Yahweh said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho and its kings mighty warriors into your hand. And you shall go around the city, all the men of battle going around the city once. So you shall do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. And on the 7th day you shall go around the city 7 times, and the priest shall blow with the ram's horns. And it shall be, when you make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the ram's horn, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down underneath below you, and the people shall go up, each man in front of him." And then if we drop down to verse 14. "And they circled the city on the 2nd day 1 time, and returned to the camp. So they did 6 days. And it happened on the 7th day, they rose early at the dawning of the day, and they went around the city 7 times in the same way. Only on that day they circled the city 7 times. And it happened at the 7th time the priest blew with the ram's horn, and Joshua said to the people, 'Shout, for Yahweh is giving you the city. And the city shall be devoured, the city shall be devoted to Yahweh, it and all that are in it.'" So very clearly we see this. We see the pattern. And when did they build GilGal? At the same time they came into Jericho. So we see this pattern, this circular pattern of worship. And verse 17, "And the city will be devoted to Yahweh." So that circular pattern had to deal with not just a normal procession, it had to deal with worship. It had to deal with worship because Yahweh's Mazeroth, Yahweh's calendar, Yahweh himself is circular. He's eternal. He has no beginning and no end. So doing this functional circular pattern, because we said the way they thought, it was their way of giving worship toward Yahweh for his way of being eternal. So we see it, like I said, we see it with Jericho as soon as they're coming into the land. We see it with the building of GilGal. We see it with Exodus. Let's go back now to Exodus 23. I want to read the rest of that verse there. Exodus 23. Go back to verse 14. "3 times in the year you shall make a feast, a Hagag, a circular pattern of worship to me. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, as I have commanded you, at the set time of the month of Aviv. For in it you came out of Egypt, and they shall not appear before me empty. Also the feast of harvest, the first fruits of your labor, of what you sow in the field, and also at the feast of ingathering." 2 times in the Bible that it's called ingathering and not Sukkot. "After the going out of the year, at your gathering your work from the field." So again, we see again the equinox, the circular pattern of the year, and the equinox being connected with the worship. That it's all connected together. That we see it here. So the Hagag, the properly to move in a circle, that it's connected because of Yahweh's pattern in the heavens, Yahweh's Mazeroth that goes around in the circle, Yahweh's year from equinox to equinox that goes around in the circle, Yahweh's month from new moon to new moon that goes around the circle. It's all a circular pattern. So again, if you're going by arbitrarily barley that some man is planting, it doesn't fit the pattern. If you're going by a crescent sighting, it doesn't fit the pattern. You know, it doesn't fit the pattern. I would like to now, if we can, Andy, get that second video set up, that there's, you remember Katrina and Richard. Katrina had given me information of a website of a couple that actually lived in Saudi Arabia for 12 years. They worked there, and they were able to get amazing footage of Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia. And there was something, though, a piece of what they found that I want to show you. What they found in Saudi Arabia, because it very much connects with GilGal and what we're talking about today.
In the same area that the split rock at Rephidim is found, dozens of ruins dot the landscape, including cairns, kilns, and stone furnaces. These circular formations, however, are by far the most intriguing and seem to be the oldest in the valley. Arranged with several connected together, they even have doorways and thresholds. The Amalek came to fight Israel at Rephidim. I found at least 8 sling stones among these circles in evidence of that very battle. The circles are oriented toward this ridge where we saw brilliant light in April of 1992. Arab lore tells of a mysterious mountain of lights here called Jebel al-Nur. From Rephidim, we travel south to the crossing site of the Red Sea. Here we found an outstanding witness to a catastrophic event. Massive coral heads have been ripped from their bases and thrown far up on the shore. In numerous places, bronze pieces are embedded among the coral and the twisted shells. Amazingly, this petrified formation is not found anywhere else along the entire Gulf of Aqaba. And now to the awesome wilderness of Arabia. South of Mount Sinai, in the most uninhabitable regions of the country, artifacts can be found scattered all over the desert. The arrowheads and spear points found here are known to be of Egyptian design. Their sheer numbers prove that a vast congregation of people passed through this place. Here, you can see the delicate pressure-flaked points. Beside the arrowheads, more weaponry, such as hand axes and this bola type, have been found in abundance. Others include handheld grinders. The Bible tells us that the women ground the manna and baked it into cakes. All the way back to Rephidim now, we find petroglyphs or stone carvings on numerous outcroppings of rock. Perhaps the most profound of all are the feet carvings. From small to large in size, they are found all over this region. Awe-inspiring they are, for Moses told the children of Israel in Deuteronomy 11:24, "Every place whereupon the soles of your feet shall tread shall be yours."
These feet, or these footprints, are actually, we call them the footprints, but to be honest, these are soles of feet. These are not feet with toes like some sort of prehistoric cave art. There's something very specific going on here, and we've seen these all over Arabia, but they are heavily concentrated up in this area by where this huge split rock is. And I just happened to have my Bible open and reading in Deuteronomy while I just happened to have our photo albums open one day, and it suddenly occurred to me, I was reading Deuteronomy 11:24. And it occurred to me, what am I looking at here? What if these carved, sandaled footprints that are all over the rocks, and these are deeply etched, by the way, they would have well standed 3,000 years of time. What if these are the footprints of the children of Israel, according to the promise? What if? And I remember I went screaming down the stairs and told it to Jim, and he just looked at me like I had completely lost my mind, which he probably had a right to do. But look at what it says in Deuteronomy 11:24. "Every place whereon the soles of your feet shall tread shall be yours." If this does not relate to the children of Israel, that is more profound to us than even the possible location of the real Mount Sinai, because of that promise, because that brings it to where we are today. Why are all these footprints all over the Arabian Peninsula? And is anyone going to recognize whose feet they really are?
Wow.
Now, if you have an idea, I've got to tell you just very quickly, we have a very, very dear friend and brother in Christ. His name is Dr. Sung-Hak Kim. He shared something with us, and his discovery, he and his wife found something that is so profound within the vicinity. It was not right at the base of the mountain, but within the vicinity around the mountain, that's going to become the greatest discovery of our time, which proves to us who was doing the actual writing on these rocks. This is Dr. Kim. This is his photograph and his discovery. We have a covering over it, but the next photo we're going to show you, if you have any doubt as to who wrote on those rocks,
goodness.
you don't now.
Yeah.
Now, can you even imagine?
Now that character we were showing next to the footprints is a calf. It's three lines, three straight lines. That calf fits into the ancient Thamudic language, which evolves into the ancient Hebraic. But what is being revealed here, and scholars have debated whether it's 1000 BC, 3000 BC, but they never get around the time of the Exodus. And what this is going to do is focus people and the scholars to look at the time of the Exodus for the origin of this Thamudic language.
So amazing. Amazing when you see this, that here it is. Like I said, it's so much more than just finding the physical place of GilGal. It's connecting all of it together. And that this sandal, can you imagine, is connected to knowing the true Red Sea crossing site in Saudi Arabia. So the last scripture I want to go in is Ezekiel 43 and verse 7. And we know Ezekiel 40 through 48 is what? All about the millennium, Yeshua's return, the third temple being set up, and look what he says. And he said to me, Son of man, you know, this is Elohim speaking, the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet, there where I dwell among the sons of Israel forever. Even the house of Israel shall not defile my holy name anymore, they nor their kings by their fornication, nor by the corpses of their kings in their high places. So Yahweh says that when this comes, behold, Son of man, the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet. So, wow, you know, after 3,500 years to find the sole of the foot of Yahweh and then have it all connected, it's just amazing the things that he's bringing out today. You know, the real Mount Sinai, the real GilGal, connecting all these things together, and like I said, not just finding it, but understanding how important the biblical significance is of the foot for conquering the land and the permanency of the covenant, for the foot showing peace and prosperity in the land, for the foot connected to worship, and also the circular pattern of worship. Because again, once you know Yahweh's pattern, the pattern never changes. And it helps us to be able to recognize archaeology, because his pattern doesn't change. Now we know definitely that's Mount Sinai over there. It helps us to understand the calendar. It helps us to understand the Mazarot. It helps us to understand everything by understanding Yahweh's pattern. Yahweh bless.